So, again, welcome to LiberalViewer Sunday Live Clip Roundup. I only have about a dozen clips for you this Sunday. This weekend I was actually boating on Lake Tahoe. I thought I would show you that just to prove why I actually started off in Lake Tahoe this morning and didn't leave there till almost noon, so I didn't have quite as much time to get you clips today, so I only have about a dozen, but there's some good ones, and I wanted to add in some of the quasi-news clips from Real Time with Bill Maher this time. I've done that on a few previous shows, and you know, I did talk on Liberal Viewer Wednesday. I did a special edition on the marriage equality cases that the Supreme Court decided this week. But what I didn't really discuss is the voting rights case that was decided by the Supreme Court just the day before the marriage equality cases. I even had a question from, is it Aaron Political, who, and I forgot to bring it up in Liberal Viewer Wednesday, or I missed it for Liberal Viewer Wednesday. So I wanted to show you a commentary from Bill Maher on Real Time with Bill Maher last Friday, talking about the Voting Rights Act. And he actually starts with an interesting quotation from one of our most respected and scholarly judges in the United States, Richard Posner. And let me show you what he said about the decision in the Voting Rights Act case in this clip.
Justice Department. Let me read Richard Posner's quote on this. He said, the Roberts Court struck down a key part of the Voting Rights Act as violating the fundamental principle of equal sovereignty of the states, a principle of constitutional law of which I had never heard, for the excellent reason that there is no such principle. The opinion rests on air. In other words, Justice Roberts just pulled out of his ass. This is what I love about the Supreme Court. You think that they're so high-minded, and you hear the things Scalia says. He quotes talking points from Fox News. The things he was saying about the Defense of Marriage Act were the exact things I've heard idiots say on Sean Hannity's show. We're not a bigot because we're against the gay people getting married. Yeah, kind of, you are.
Well, the phrase separation of church.
So I thought that was kind of an amusing clip, and what he said there about you can see at the beginning about the Voting Rights Act case. Justice Roberts came up with this idea of equality of state sovereignty. You know, we said that the fundamental principle of equal sovereignty of the states, and that really, I mean, the only place that came from was a case about Oklahoma, where they were talking about a condition of the entry of Oklahoma. I mean, it comes from, here I've got I've got a copy of the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution of the United States right here. And by the way, this is a copy from the Cato Institute. So it's not one of those liberal constitutions. This is like a libertarian conservative constitution. And if you look over in Article 4, Section, I believe it's Article 4, Section 3 says, new states may be admitted by the Congress into the Union, but no new state shall be formed or erected within the jurisdiction of any other state, nor any state be formed by the jurisdiction of two or more states or parts of states without the consent of the legislatures of the states concerned as well as the Congress. And from that, there was a case like in the 19th century saying Oklahoma couldn't be required to keep its state capital in one place as a condition of entry, and they're trying to use that to say that there's some principle of equality of the states that doesn't have anything to do with their entry into the Union, and they're using that clause from the entry of the Union. I mean, see, that's the thing. In the Voting Rights Act decision, the majority opinion says that the Voting Rights Act violated the Constitution, but they never really said what part of the Constitution. And the thing is, the 15th Amendment says in Section 2, the Congress has all power to enforce this article by appropriate legislation, and that's Article 15 is the right of citizens of the United States to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of race, color, or previous condition of servitude. And so there's actually a amendment right in the Constitution that gives Congress the power to enforce voting rights. And there's nothing in the Constitution that stops Congress from doing what they did in the Voting Rights Act. So, I mean, it was kind of a disturbing decision, and I kind of like Bill Maher's commentary there. I wanted to show you one more clip from Real Time with Bill Maher. I thought my viewers would particularly enjoy this. It's actually about religion and climate change, about how... now, I have to preface this by saying earlier he had a climate change expert on talking about how he's really happy that evangelicals, that a majority of evangelical Christians accept the idea that climate change is man-made and that we have to do something about it. But there are still some, you know, fringe religious people who use religion as an excuse not to do something about climate change, and Bill Maher talked about them last Friday on Real Time with Bill Maher on HBO, which I'm going to do a little clicking here real quick, which I wanted to show you a good clip of that right here.
I think it's a coincidence that we're the most religious of Western democracies and also the one that denies global warming, because I've heard the congressmen like Joe Barton and John Chimkus say things like, this is what they say, I'm not making this up, we do not have to worry about global warming because in the Bible, oh, well, you had me there. In the Bible, God promised Noah after the flood. Yeah, they believe in Noah, literally.
I believe in Noah.
Right. Okay.
But that doesn't inform.
Wait, they said, wait, let me just finish. They said God promised Noah after the flood, because God felt shitty about the flood, because, you know, he's God, so he feels shitty about stuff, that he would never try to wipe everyone out again. And that's why we don't have to worry about. Can you really believe that we're basing policy on this old Bronze Age fairy tale? I mean, this is why, you know, people say, why do you have such a thing about religion? I don't dislike religious people, but religious beliefs I do hate because they're going to get us all killed.
Well, listen,
I don't think it's a coincidence.
So I enjoyed that clip there. I thought, and I also thought the atheist community on YouTube would enjoy that clip. And he says he doesn't dislike religious people. There's some religious beliefs that are just so crazy and outmoded and dangerous that he has problems with those. And I can understand that, and I kind of enjoyed those clips from Real Time with Bill Maher, and I hope you enjoyed those. I also, while I was still in Lake Tahoe this morning, I actually watched live a speech from Barack Obama in South Africa at the University of Cape Town, and I don't actually have a link to the full speech, but by the time this is, if you're watching this as a recorded show, I should have a link down below to the whole speech on the White House website. And there are some really interesting, inspiring parts to the speech, and I decided to get 3 clips from it to show my viewers this Sunday. And I wanted to, here I'm just doing a little clicking as I get everything loaded up here. The first clip I wanted to show you was Barack Obama talking about how back when he was in college, the first political thing he ever got involved in was the anti-apartheid divestment movement in the United States. That was a movement, I remember that. I was in college. I'm just a couple years younger than President Barack Obama, and I remember when I was in college that there was a divestment movement to try to get universities to stop investing in companies in South Africa or companies that did business with South Africa. And he talks about how that was one of the first things that got him politically active, and how actually he was kind of cynical and detached when he was a 19-year-old in college in California. I think he went to, was it Claremont? In Pomona, one of those colleges in Pomona. And so I wanted to Well, I wanted to show you this clip of how he talked about the way he felt. I think reflects a lot of the like young people on YouTube who I see commenting about how they're kind of cynical and detached. Well, this is how Barack Obama was when he was in college, as he told this audience in Cape Town, South Africa earlier today here.
But I had never cared much for politics. I didn't think it mattered to me. I didn't think I could make a difference. And like many young people, I thought that cynicism, a certain ironic detachment, was a sign of wisdom and sophistication. But then I learned what was happening here in South Africa. And two young men, ANC representatives, came to our college and spoke. And I spent time hearing their stories. And I learned about the courage of those who waged the defiance campaign and the brutality leveled against.
And so, wait, I'm sorry. Then he goes on to talk about how he made a short, like, 2-minute speech at this anti-apartheid divestment rally. And it was kind of almost a joke speech, because then like a couple people in like Secret Service outfits came and like hustled him off, and he felt a little embarrassed about it afterwards, and he didn't really feel like he had done much. But now when he looks back on it, he actually realizes that it was the beginning of an important realization that brought him out of his cynicism, and I wanted to show you a clip of that part of the speech here.
And I'll be honest with you, when I was done, I did not think that I had made any difference. I was even a little embarrassed. And I thought to myself, what's a bunch of university kids doing in California that is somehow going to make a difference? It felt too distant from what people were going through in places like Soweto. But looking back, as I look at that 19-year-old young man, I'm more forgiving of the fact that the speech might not have been that great. Because I know now that something inside me was stirring at the time, something important. And that was the belief that I could be part of something bigger than myself. That my own salvation was bound up with those of others. That's what Bobby Kennedy expressed far better than I ever could when he spoke here at the University of Cape Town in 1966. He said, each time a man stands up for an ideal, or acts to improve the lot of others, or strikes out against injustice, he sends forth a tiny ripple of hope. And crossing each other from a million different centers of energy and daring, those ripples build a current which can sweep down the mightiest walls of oppression and resistance.
So I thought that was a really interesting way to explain how people can overcome their cynicism and detachment. I see like the cynicism and detachment attitude amongst a lot of people at the age that Barack Obama, and even older people who think, you know, nothing they can do makes a difference, and it's more cool to be cynical and detached and don't think that you can do anything. And it's true that, you know, most of us can't really do much on our own, but I like that metaphor about the ripples of hope, and how the ripples of hope can all come together to create a real, you know, strong force that can overcome oppression. And, you know, saying that in South Africa, he then went on to talk about all the accomplishments in South Africa, and how they had overcome, you know, their, you know, and how Africa itself is starting, you know, a move towards more democratic values, and And he said that they still have some work to do. You know, there's still some problems in Africa. And he made a point about that. This is the third clip I wanted to show from his speech at Cape Town, where he talked about even though there's still some problems in Africa, that there is sort of an important principle that makes him optimistic instead of cynical these days. And that's this clip right here.
But this work is not complete. We all know that. Not in those countries where leaders enrich themselves with impunity. Not in communities where you can't start a business or go to school or get a house without paying a bribe to somebody. These things have to change. And they have to change not just because such corruption is immoral, but it's also a matter of self-interest and economics. Governments that respect the rights of their citizens and abide by the rule of law do better, grow faster, draw more investment than those who don't. That's just a fact.
And yeah, I think that's right. It's important to remember that, and it kind of reminds me, here, I'll click this, of a couple quotes, one from Gandhi and one from Martin Luther King Jr. About that, and it's why it's kind of my antidote for cynicism that, you know, things are getting worse or there's nothing we can do to make a difference. So there's this quote from Gandhi. There have been tyrants and murderers, and for a time they can seem invincible, but in the end they always fail. Think of it, always. And then, of course, there's the MLK quote that he sort of modified from someone else, that the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. And, I mean, I don't know, I mean, if you believe that, but I actually do believe that that even though that there can be tyranny, and, you know, there have been a lot of these stories about the increasing power of the government, and I think people are getting worried about totalitarian surveillance states maybe, but I think that I kind of remain optimistic because of kind of what President Obama said in that last clip about how the countries that respect the rule of law and give freedom to their citizens, they are the more successful countries or the more successful societies. And that I believe that since back in the Cold War, when I thought that capitalism was going to defeat communism just because it was a more free system, and it was going to be more, it was going to grow better, and it was going to have more economic success, and it was going to provide better for its people. And when you do that, you're going to be the more successful society. And I still wanted to put all those in there to kind of overcome cynicism, and maybe overcome pessimism. I don't know. Maybe you disagree with me on that, but I just wanted to give you those quotes to give you something to think about maybe. But I also, speaking of Martin Luther King, I saw, I wanted to get onto the issue of the NSA spying I was just talking about. There was an interesting quote from Martin Luther King on Fareed Zakaria's GPS, or Global Public Square, which is a CNN show that I often enjoy. And it was talking about Edward Snowden and whether he was engaging in civil disobedience. And I noticed this has been kind of a big issue. It's almost as big an issue as the Edward Snowden hero or traitor debate. And I'm sorry, I'm getting everything all queued up here. I think it's all ready. So I wanted to show you this clip from Zakaria talking about whether Edward Snowden engaged, Edward Snowden, the NSA leaker who leaked all this information about NSA spying, whether Edward Snowden is actually engaging in civil disobedience, and using Martin Luther King Jr.'s definition in this clip.
One who breaks an unjust law must do so openly, lovingly, and with a willingness to accept the penalty. That was Martin Luther King Jr.'s definition of civil disobedience. It does not appear to be Edward Snowden's. He has tried by every method possible to escape any judgment or punishment for his actions. Snowden's been compared to Daniel Ellsberg, the man who leaked the Pentagon Papers to the New York Times. But Ellsberg did not hop on a plane to Hong Kong or Moscow once he had unloaded his cache of documents. He stood trial and faced the possibility of more than 100 years in prison before the court dismissed the case against him because of the prosecution's mistakes and abuses of justice. Mahatma Gandhi and Jawaharlal Nehru spent years in prison in India for defying British colonial rule in their native land.
So I think there's some truth to what Zakaria is saying there, that what Edward Snowden is doing isn't traditional civil disobedience, because in traditional civil disobedience, you're actually accepting the legal consequences of your actions and using your punishment as a way to show the world that you're being unjustly treated. That's what Gandhi did. That's what Nelson Mandela did in South Africa as well. How many years did he spend in prison trying to show the injustice of the apartheid system in South Africa? So it's true that I think Edward Snowden doesn't meet that traditional definition of civil disobedience, and I think some people don't really understand that difference. I noticed some people in the Occupy Wall Street movement didn't really understand that difference, because they expected to be protected by the First Amendment from breaking, curfew laws or other kind of laws where what they really were doing was engaging in civil disobedience, where they should have been taking their punishment and showing the injustice of the system by taking their punishment. But anyway, that's a whole other issue. But on the other hand, you could say that Edward Snowden isn't really going to get a fair shake if he were to submit himself to the U.S. justice system, and that was kind of came up when Julian Assange appeared on This Week with George Stephanopoulos this morning, and I wanted to show you a clip on that topic here.
What can you tell us about where Edward Snowden is right now and where he's expected to go?
Thank you, George. I wish I could answer these questions of yours in more detail. The situation now with Edward Snowden is a very sensitive one. It's a matter of international diplomatic negotiations, so there's little that I can productively say about what is happening directly. But look, let's pull back a bit. Why is it that Mr. Snowden is not in the United States? He should feel that he should be afforded justice in the United States. But his situation is very similar to a situation that I face and that my staff face, where we have been sucked into a grand jury in Alexandria, Virginia. That's where the charges for Mr. Snowden came from, Alexandria, Virginia. Well, what do we know about that district? It's 6 kilometres from the centre of Washington, D.C. The jury pool is made up of the CIA, Pentagon, etc. In the legal community in the United States, it's known as the rocket docket because of the lack of scrutiny procedures have there. There's a 99% chance that if you're, sorry, a 99.97% chance that if you're a target of a grand jury, you'll be indicted, and a 99% chance that if you're indicted by a grand jury, you'll be convicted. So this is not a situation, ignoring all the political rhetoric which we've seen, which has been terrible over the past 2 weeks, where Mr. Snowden can feel that he would be afforded justice.
But is there...
So that's kind of one look at how, or a reason why Edward Snowden might not be engaging in real civil disobedience, because the justice system he's facing has a very high conviction rate, although I'm not sure I agree with everything that Julian Assange said there. And, one thing I thought was interesting about what Julian Assange's answer to George Stephanopoulos' question is, here, I'll show you the very beginning of his answer there again real quick. He said,
what can you tell us about where Edward Snowden is right now and where he's expected to go?
Thank you, George. I wish I could answer these questions of yours in more detail. The situation now with Edward Snowden is a very sensitive one. It's a matter of international diplomatic negotiations, so there's little that I can productively say about what is happening directly.
So he's saying that because it's a sensitive diplomatic situation, he can't say anything about what's happening with Edward Snowden. I just wanted to replay that because I find it kind of ironic, because Julian Assange's website, WikiLeaks, has published so much sensitive diplomatic information, you know, all these like diplomatic cables saying things about foreign government, you know, U.S. diplomats saying things about foreign governments that are very unflattering, but he doesn't have any compunction about publishing those. But when he's involved in a situation, all of a sudden secrecy or privacy or non-disclosure is a good option because of the diplomatic sensitivity of the situation. You know, I'm a big believer in transparency and openness, and I really like what WikiLeaks does, but sometimes when I watch Julian Assange, he seems kind of, I don't know, there are things about him I don't really like, but I like what he does, but some of his justifications, and he seems kind of, I'm going to put a link to his interview there on This Week with George Stephanopoulos, and you'll see he never really answered the questions he was asked, and he kind of brought a lot of his answers back to himself. He seems, I don't know, I like WikiLeaks, and I like, you know, what Julian Assange has done, but his personality, I don't know. I guess I don't really know the guy, so I shouldn't really comment on it. But anyway, going back to his point about Edward Snowden not being able to get justice in the United States, there was also another guest on, was JesselynRassick, who was another whistleblower and represents a group that represents whistleblowers. And she also talked about the difficulty of Edward Snowden getting justice in the United States, and I wanted to show you that in this clip.
Saying that he believes that his son would be willing to come back to the United States if he would not be detained or imprisoned prior to trial, if he would not be subject to a gag order, if he would be tried in the venue of his choosing. Do you think it would make sense for Snowden to return under those circumstances?
I actually don't. I have represented people like Thomas Drake, who was an NSA whistleblower, who actually did go through every conceivable internal channel possible, including his boss, the Inspector General of his agency, the Defense Department Inspector General, and 2 congressional committees, and the U.S. turned around and prosecuted him, and did so for espionage, and threatened to tie him up for the rest of his life in jail. I think Snowden's outlook is bleak here, and instead of focusing on Snowden and shooting the messenger, we should really focus on the crimes of the NSA, because whatever laws Snowden may or may not have broken, they are infinitesimally small compared to the 2 major surveillance laws and the 4th Amendment of the Constitution that NSA has violated.
So I think that's, I mean, that last point I really agree with, is that people get too caught up on whether Edward Snowden is a hero or a traitor, is he engaging in civil disobedience, and the whole discussion of Edward Snowden takes away from the discussion of the NSA spying program itself, and I think that's where the discussion should really be focused. And by the way, that's my next video is going to be titled "Impeach Obama Over NSA Spying," and I'm going to be criticizing a video about actually I'm going to be criticizing a video from The Amazing Atheist talking about why Obama should be impeached for implementing laws on NSA spying that the Congress passed, and there's been some judicial oversight. And anyway, I'm going to be talking about that more in my upcoming video, so I did want to show you those clips, and I'm going to switch gears here real quickly while the clicking you hear is me loading up the next 3 clips, because my Wirecast for YouTube software, for some reason, only lets me load up 3 clips at a time. I already did a LiberalViewer Wednesday special edition on the marriage equality cases that came out of the Supreme Court, but there were a few clips on that I wanted to show you from This Week with George Stephanopoulos. A couple of them came from Chad Griffin, who is kind of the most responsible party, or I think he's from Human Rights Campaign, if I have that right, who originally brought the Prop 8 California proposition that prohibited same-sex marriage in California. He brought that suit, or he was responsible for bringing that suit. If I have that right, I'm not sure, but I wanted to show you a couple things that he said about the marriage equality decision this last week by the Supreme Court. The first thing he talked about was whether the Congress... Well, first he talked about how he thinks the Obama administration is going to implement marriage equality in all the federal regulations. That's basically the result of the decision in the Windsor case that struck down one of the sections of the Defense of Marriage Act that said that the federal government couldn't recognize marriages, same-sex marriages that states themselves recognized. And Chad Griffin was saying that he thought that the Obama administration would quickly take care of that problem, but there might still be some need for some laws passed in the Congress on the issue. And I wanted to show you that clip, first of all, from This Week with George Stephanopoulos here.
This administration has been doing a lot already to ensure implementation of this decision. The president said, in his view, a marriage is a marriage. And I hope and expect that very soon legally married couples, regardless of where they reside, will receive all benefits. Now, there are some issues that Congress might have to address, and there's currently a piece of legislation called the Respect for Marriage Act that fully rescinds the parts that are remaining of the so-called Defense of Marriage Act. And I expect that Congress will move on that and put into place real permanence so that families across this country can have the protections that they deserve under the law.
So I think that's right, that the Obama administration is going to implement the Windsor decision so that the federal government is going to kind of recognize same-sex marriages across the board, but Congress may have to repeal the Defense of Marriage Act, or the sections of the Defense of Marriage Act that say that states don't have to recognize marriages that are recognized by other states. And that's going to be the big fight coming up. Is about 30% of the U.S. population, I think, what is it, 13 states now, but California is about 10% of the population. So by adding California, there are now about 30% of the U.S. population is lives in states that recognize marriage equality. And so the next steps will be to see how to get marriage equality in those other states, and if that part of the Defense of Marriage Act that says that states don't have to recognize marriages from other states, same-sex marriages from other states, is repealed, that would be a good step going forward, but it may have to go through litigation. And, you know, there are two real questions in the marriage equality debate that I think that people who oppose marriage equality can never really answer, and I wanted to talk about or show you a clip from Chad Griffin on that issue at the end of his interview on This Week with George Stephanopoulos here.
At the end of the day, you have to ask yourself two questions. Who is harmed by receiving marriage equality coming to this country? I've asked my friends in those marriage states, my straight friends, and I can't find a single couple whose straight marriage has been harmed, but when the gay couple down the street got married. The other question you have to ask yourself is who benefits? Who benefits? It's what Justice Kennedy wrote about. Those kids, thousands upon thousands of kids today who are being raised by same-sex parents. All this does is give them the same rights, protections, and privileges as a straight child being raised by straight parents. So we have to move with great speed and great urgency to ensure that families across this country have equal protection under the law, and we're well on our way. We're not there yet, but we're well on our way.
So I think that's an important point, and I've made that in previous live events, that I don't think you can show any harm from same-sex couples getting married, and I mean, that's really why prohibitions against same-sex marriage are going to fail constitutionally, because in order even to pass a rational basis review on constitutionality of a law, you have to show that it is legitimately or it is rationally related to a legitimate state interest. And if you can't show any harm that prohibiting same-sex marriage if you can't show any harm from same-sex marriages, there is no legitimate state interest in prohibiting them. And it was kind of interesting, this one of the proponents of one of the proponents of Proposition 8 who wanted to ban same-sex marriage was also on This Week with George Stephanopoulos, and George Stephanopoulos actually asked him, how does same-sex marriage harm anybody? And he tried to answer that, as you can see in this clip.
Chad, Griffin, let's take the first one. Who is harmed by legalizing same-sex marriage?
Well, we just saw who was harmed. The rule of law is harmed, and all those millions of voters in the state of California who stood up and said, we know the truth about marriage. We know that marriage is the union of a man and a woman. They are harmed when the courts are used to say they don't have a right to be represented. And that's what the court did. Chad talks about American values. Is it an American value to deprive those people in California who stood up and voted to protect marriage as the union of a man and a woman from their right to be heard?
So it looked to me there like this guy could not really come up with a harm from same-sex marriage. He had to say it was the people who voted for the law to prohibit it. They were the ones who were harmed, but that kind of begs the question, what were they voting for? Why was it that they were harmed? And I mean, all the arguments he just made were the same arguments you could make for prohibiting interracial marriages. He did a really bad job. So that was the marriage equality issue. I wanted to show a couple clips on that, even though I kind of covered it on LiberalViewer Wednesday Live earlier this week. And then another important issue that was covered, it was a really big news week this week, and another big issue was the comprehensive immigration reform passed the Senate. And I have a couple clips here from the two top senators in the Gang of 8, which is the Senate. It's like 8 senators who, Republicans and Democrats, who came up with this compromise and that passed the Senate. I think it was 68 votes. Was it 67, 68, something like that? So it was all the Democrats and a significant number of Republicans. Excuse me, I need to do my Marco Rubio here. Speaking of the Gang of 8, because Marco Rubio is part of the Gang of 8, but the two leaders of the Gang of 8 are John McCain and Chuck Schumer, and they were both on Fox News Sunday talking about comprehensive immigration reform, and they said they were talking about whether it's going to die now that it goes to the House of Representatives, where there's a Republican majority. And the question is, will the Speaker of the House, John Boehner, bring it up for a vote, even though a majority of the Republicans in the House are probably going to vote against it? And there was commentary both from John McCain and Chuck Schumer. First, I'll show you what John McCain said in this clip.
After years of going after this, after suffering the slings and arrows you did, you finally have a bill. Are you concerned that your colleagues in the House may derail all of the work that you've done?
Well, I'm concerned about the task ahead of us. I believe that It's a fact that the overwhelming majority of the American people support this proposal once it's explained to them. And I believe that the coalition that we've assembled of support, ranging from evangelicals, the Catholic Church, business, labor, farm workers, growers, it's a coalition that I frankly have never seen such widespread support, and I'm hopeful that we can convince our House colleagues, and I intend to address them with respect. I believe that Speaker Boehner has a tough job ahead. I admire his leadership, but we've got a lot of work to do.
So that was kind of a mealy-mouthed way of trying to talk to the House Republicans about what they should do on the bill passed by the Senate. The whole, like, I respect them and they're going to do what they're going to do. But what I thought was really interesting was Chuck Schumer's prediction that by the end of the year, the Republicans in the House of Representatives aren't going to be able to stop themselves from passing the Senate bill just the way the Senate bill is written. And he was answering a question about whether the House of Representatives if it's going to be a problem because they want to pass it in like these little pieces, with the border security coming first and the path to citizenship coming second. Anyway, so here's Chuck Schumer's prediction about why the House Republicans are going to give up on the Hastert rule and say, the Hastert rule says that no bill will come up in the House of Representatives unless the majority of the majority supports it, which means the majority of Republicans. And he's saying that he thinks that the House of Representatives is going to give up on that idea before the end of the year for the reasons in this clip.
I believe that by the end of this year, the House will pass the Senate bill. I know that's not what they think now, and they'll say, oh, no, that's not what's going to happen. But I think it will, and let me explain why. First, I understand where Speaker Boehner's coming from. I have a lot of respect for the House, and he's got a whole lot of Republican members. I'm sure a majority of our caucus saying they will vote no. They fear Republican primaries from the right if they vote yes. But I believe over the next several months that dynamic will change, and they will start saying to him, they can't vote for it. They still are worried about their primaries, but let it get off our backs for four reasons, actually. First, the coalition John mentioned. It's a broad and deep coalition of people who usually don't side with Democrats, the Catholic Church and the evangelicals, the business community, the growers. And now they're going to feel a desire. High tech is really enthusiastic. They're going to feel a desire to get this done quickly. Second, the national Republican leadership will tell John Boehner, if you don't pass a bill, then we're going to be a minority party for a generation. And he's not only the House leader, he's a party leader. Third, this has the potential for being one of the greatest civil rights movements we've ever seen. I could see at the end of this summer 1 million people on the Mall in August asking for the bill. And who's going to be on stage? Not the usual suspects, but the bishops and the evangelicals and the business leaders. And finally, and very importantly as well, we're not going to let this issue go away. The strong supporters of immigration are going to be at the town hall meetings of Republican congressmen. They're going to be visiting them in their offices. They're going to be traipsing in the halls of Congress. We've seen the power of these DREAM Act kids. You put all that together, and you add one more fact. I don't think Speaker Boehner can pass piecemeal bills. In other words, let's take the toughest one, enforcement. No Democrat will vote for any bill without a path to citizenship, and about 40 Republicans are saying they're not voting for any bill because they don't want a conference.
All right.
So within several months, Speaker Boehner will find two choices: no bill, or let a bill pass with a majority of Democratic votes and some Chamber of Commerce type Republicans, and he'll find that the better choice. We'll pass the Senate bill by the end of this year, even though most House members don't think so.
Well, there was
so I found that to be the most optimistic assessment of comprehensive immigration reform I've seen in a while, because if you remember from LiberalViewer Sunday live clip roundup last Sunday, I was starting to think maybe it's not going to pass the House, but I don't know. Senator Chuck Schumer's smarter and more informed than I am about the U.S. Congress. He was in the House of Representatives for quite a while, so maybe he knows what he's talking about there. Maybe it will actually pass. So those are the clips I have to show you. I'm way out of time because it took so long to start this show. But I hope you enjoyed the clips I showed you. you can let me know if, let's see, if there are any like really important comments I can take here. It's after 8 and I was planning on being done over an hour ago, so I'm sorry that I had such problems connecting up and getting the show started. I hope you enjoyed the clips that I played for you. I'm not really going to have much time to take comments here, so have a good rest of your weekend. I have to go eat dinner with my family, and look forward to my video coming up, the Impeach Obama for NSA spying ? That's going to be a criticism of people who put too much responsibility on President Barack Obama for the NSA spying program without looking at the responsibilities of the other branches, including Congress, where Barack Obama as a senator voted for the legislation that enables the programs he's implementing now. And there are a lot more subtleties to that issue that I hope you will look for in my upcoming video. And so have a good end to your weekend and rest your week, and see you hopefully on LiberalViewer Wednesday Live this Wednesday at 4:30 p.m. Pacific Time, which will be the last weekly version of that show. It will start becoming a LiberalViewer First Wednesday Live, because this will be the first Wednesday of the month. So see you there, and thanks for joining me. Sorry for all the technical difficulties, and thanks for joining me.